Welcome, age of vintage society. Howard Hughes was not your average man. He was a millionaire eccentric playboy who didn't play by the rules because he made the rules. He was the villain you loved to hate, with quirks that were both annoying and somehow interesting. The man had women crooning for him, and he cycled through them skillfully. Casanova would be proud of how Hughes managed to seduce women, but his quirks soon became twisted and threatening for himself and those around him. How Howard Hughes made women feel special in bed. Howard Hughes was an eccentric millionaire who built planes and produced films. Yeah, the two things he did were not in any way related, but he was rich and he made it work. The man even managed to bring his two interests together for the film Hell's Angels. As he made films and flew, Hughes had another hobby. He loved flirting with pretty actresses. He was so good that before they knew it, they were warming his bed with him in a tangle of passion. He was a man of impeccable taste in women, and he dated some of the prettiest actresses at the time: Ava Gardner, Betty Davis, Katharine Hepburn, Olivia de Havilland, and Rita Hayworth. The film producer was by no means perfect, but he had a way of making women open up to him. Betty Davis certainly didn't know when she bared it all for the man. For her, it started at the Hollywood benefit dinner with the Tail Waggers Society, an animal rescue organisation. Betty Davis was the president of the organisation, so she hosted the dinner and invited Howard Hughes. Howard was someone you wanted at your event. He wasn't stingy with the money he had. The delectable Betty Davis was one of the most demanded actresses at the time. The likes of Katharine Hepburn and Greta Garbo were in decline, and Davis was filling their boots nicely. With her talent, it was an easy thing for her. Besides her talent, the sexy actress could be as every bit as sexually notorious as those two. During my time, my appreciation for intimacy was viewed as inappropriate for a woman, Davis once said. She wasn't kidding. While she was married, she began an affair with the director of Jezebel, William Wyler. The affair was so deep and so passionate that it resulted in a pregnancy that she had to remove. After the film, she and her lover went their separate ways, but another one lurked in a dinner, dressed crisply with boundless eccentricity. Speaking of crispy dressing, Davis loved wearing revealing dresses, and it was one of such dresses she wore at the dinner she met Howard. But Howard made an impression on her by not staring at her cleavage but at her face. When he introduced himself, he looked into my eyes, not down my dress. That really impressed me, the actress said. All of this was just a page from the Playboy book of the wealthy Hughes. Right from when he met the actress, he began to reel her in. He spoke in a way that the actress had to lean close to him to hear. Howard wasn't brash like some wealthy people would be, if you remove his epic temper. Betty even thought him to be shy. Howard attached himself to the sexy actress throughout the dinner, and when it was about to end, he asked if he could meet her some other time. The actress was already impressed by the millionaire and was excited by him that night. She didn't mind that she was married. After all, she and her husband had issues already. Easily she promised to meet Hughes again. Well, you can guess what happened when they met. Passion flew everywhere when these two met, but they weren't brazen with their affair. They hid it well, choosing to rent a Malibu cottage so they could enjoy each other's company away from the public. But Betty's husband discovered his wife's infidelities. Seeing no point in hiding any more, Betty came out with it that she was on vacation from her husband and would soon divorce him. Soon there were newspaper articles that beautiful Davis would marry Howard as soon as her divorce from her husband got finalized. At that point it seemed Davis forgot about Howard's reputation as a playboy. She thought she would be the one that he would wed, since he was single and was also one of the most eligible bachelors of the time. Perhaps when Hughes told her that she brought him to a sexual climax, she felt what they had was ending in marriage. It most certainly didn't. Reality began to dawn on her when the rich Howard didn't lift a finger to help her pay off her husband, who requested money for him to make the divorce an easy process. Betty had to get a loan to finalize her divorce, but by the time she was done, her millionaire boyfriend had gone with the wind. and we are not talking about the film. When she asked in an interview if she would be marrying any millionaire, she laughed it off that she didn't know any millionaire, and would tell her interviewer when she met one that she wanted to share his wealth with her. At least Davis can be contented that she gave Hughes a sexual experience he wouldn't forget. At least that was what he said. Hughes had a way of making his women special. It could have been a lie, but hey, whatever kept the actress happy. While Hughes may not have lifted his finger to help Davis get a divorce from her husband, he helped Billy Dove, as he wanted her full attention when their intense affair was going on. Hughes didn't want Dove to have another man in the picture, so he paid Dove's husband $325,000 to leave her. You would think he wanted to settle down with Dove, but true to his playboy image, he cheated on her so shamelessly that the actress decided to leave him. The millionaire was a skilled lover. He was able to amaze Ava Gardner with his love-making skills. According to Ava, Hughes was the one that told her that it was best to take time when making love. He was also one of the few people that got into a fight with her. To go along with his quirks, the producer had a riotous temper, and Ava was one of the many people he unleashed it on. One time Ava didn't follow the driver to go pick Hughes up from the airport. The actress had decided to go visit her ex-husband, the notorious Mickey Rooney. So when the millionaire producer saw Ava, and rather than hug her, he rocked her jaw instead. But it didn't go Hughes's way, as Ava regained composure, and in the end Ava had to be dragged off him. But this didn't change him from having his explosive temper. His principle of taking love-making slowly made him give Gloria Vanderbilt a memorable summer. Prior to Hughes, Gloria had to fake a climax, but she didn't have to with Hughes, as he took her all the way. The eccentric millionaire rocked Gloria's world on the bed and off it, treating her to fancy dining when they weren't making love. Katharine Hepburn was also one of the women Hughes' charms caught. Katharine was an intense woman. She matched Hughes's appetite and his interests in planes. The actress and the millionaire would dive into the ocean off the wing of a seaplane and make love until they exhausted each other. After the experience, Katharine described Howard as the best lover she had ever had. However, all of this playboy side would blitz away as he began to grow older. His eccentricity, which was fueled by a mental health issue later suspected to be obsessive-compulsive disorder, began to become more dominant. He went from a great lover, wildly romantic and gentle, to a man who would stay indoors all day without clothes as he slowly but surely faded away. Howard Hughes was an irregular prodigy, and this was a gift his mother inadvertently gave to him. Howard was born in 1905 in Texas to wealthy parents, Howard Hughes Sr. and Aileen Stone Gano. He was an only child, and his mother went to great lengths to protect him. Around the time he was born, polio was ravaging America, and to keep her son safe, Aileen prevented her son from going out and having friends. He didn't interact with people from an early age, and it was the reason he was odd, dominant, and obsessed with neatness. These traits would cost him later in life. Being cooped up at home must have been boring, as Hughes began to devise ways to make his perpetual homestay better. He built a wireless transistor radio when he was 11, and when he was 12 Hughes built himself a motorized bicycle, which people say was the first of its type in Houston at that time. His talent as an engineer became apparent, for all but 2 tragedies were waiting just around the corner for him. Hughes got sick, and the nature of the sickness was inexplicable. Doctors were powerless against it, and it wasn't polio. Hughes had suddenly become paralyzed and couldn't walk for several months. But this wasn't one of the tragedies we mentioned earlier. Those tragedies were much darker. One of them was connected to Hughes' doting mother. The woman died due to complications of an ectopic pregnancy. It's ironic that after struggling for so long to keep her son safe from germs, she couldn't keep herself from getting sick. Hughes was 17 at this time, and just 2 years after, another tragedy struck. His father died, leaving him an orphan. But he was not just an orphan. He was a wealthy one. He had inherited 75% of his father's wealth and an interest in his father's company, Hughes Tool Company. He dropped out of college and looked to live like an honest man, marrying Ella Botts Rice, the great niece of the owner of Rice University, which he attended. However, Hughes would soon realise being married to one woman wasn't meant for him. Despite creating an aviation company, Howard wasn't satisfied. He aimed to become one of the big players in Hollywood, so with his wife in tow, Howard went to Hollywood determined to make movies outside the influence of the prevailing studio system. Hollywood and aviation. On the surface they didn't relate, but Hughes linked them together. He financed his film with the profit he made from his aviation company, which was valued at $5.2 billion around the time of his death. Being a genius didn't mean the producer had a bright start in Hollywood. His first projects were epic failures, but he wasn't a quitter and continued at it until he attained success. Through his success, some actors and actresses caught their big break. Prominent among them was Gene Russell, who starred in The Outlaw, Jean Harlow in Hell's Angels, Robert Mitchum in the many films that Howard made, and Jane Greer in The Big Steal. But this didn't mean he got on well with these stars. His eccentric nature and his impossible temper wouldn't allow it. In all these films, these big names and other stars worked with Hughes. There were regrets mixed with success. For Gene Russell in The Outlaw, Howard's nature didn't let them be faster with shooting. He wanted his film to be realistic and his femme fatales fatal, so when Jane Russell's bust wasn't properly accentuated during shooting, he designed a special bra to make them more prominent. Jane found the bra uncomfortable and used her normal bra with Kleenex to pad it out so it could be prominent. When the film eventually finished, Howard submitted it to the Hollywood Production Code Administration, which rejected the film because it was too sexy. But Hughes didn't get to the top by playing by the rules. He immediately began a campaign, but there was a twist. He campaigned against his film. You probably think he was crazy, but this producer's plan was brilliant. By campaigning against his film, the public became curious. They wanted to know what was in the film that didn't let the Hollywood Production Code Administration allow it to be released. Eventually the campaign worked, and after 3 years the film got released, and it was a box office success. Then there was Jean Harlow, who Hughes helped create her femme fatale image, just like he did for Russell. Jean, apart from Hughes trying to make her sexier, was subject to working extra because the eccentric producer wasn't convinced by the film's production. Howard began making films when the popular film type was silent films. The film combined his love for flying and movies, so he was pretty critical of almost everything. The film was a successful disaster. Many scenes had to be reshot to bring the film to the talking format. This led to Hughes changing the original female lead to Jean Harlow. The reshoots were the milder parts. There were dangerous stunts in the movie. When Hughes was told the final stunt was too dangerous to perform, he did it himself, as he was a trained pilot, but he almost died trying. Hughes crashed the plane and fractured his skull. However, he survived, unlike some other pilots who lost their lives to the stunts. Finally, the film, after a long while, was done, and it was a hit, but due to production costs, turned out to be a net loss. The Hell's Angels stunt wouldn't be the only time Hughes would be involved in a plane crash. Due to his childhood, Hughes always liked to be in control, and sometimes this meant being his company's test pilot. As a test pilot, Hughes continued to put his life at risk, like he had a death wish. He almost died when he tested a prototype of an Air Force reconnaissance aircraft, the Hughes XF-11. The plane suffered a technical problem, and he refused to abandon it. This accident led to the legendary producer's addiction to codeine, as it was used to treat him. But away from his near-death experiences, let's return to some of the stars he made. Up next is Robert Mitchum. Hughes regularly used the star for his films, and at some point Robert felt the star producer was living through him. The pay must have been great, because Robert endured reshoot upon reshoot, and he got frustrated to the point that he punched a stuntman. The last is Jane Greer. She was one of the women that Hughes tried to woo, but she was adamant, so instead of working for the producer, she decided to buy out her contract and work for RKO. Unfortunately for her, Hughes brought RKO and was determined to not let her work. But he soon softened his stance when the female lead of The Big Steal quit. Hughes had to use Jane in the end, and the film turned out to be Jane's biggest film yet. Hughes would continue to live his life as eccentricity dictated, but things took a darker turn. The star producer turned into a recluse. At some point he rented a cinema so that he could watch movies, and he did with just Kleenex or a towel to cover his sensitive parts. After staying 4 months in the cinema, he got kicked out. But he wasn't done being a recluse, so he bought a hotel and a TV station just so he could watch films. Slowly he began to fade. His prim and proper dressing and clean nature began to be replaced by an unkempt man with long nails and a dirty beard. He became leaner as he relied heavily on codeine and Valium. Eventually his kidneys failed and he died doing what he loved most, flying. But this time he was being flown as the life leached from his body. He died, but with the films he produced and the attention to detail in those films, he played a pivotal part in the growth of Hollywood. Men in Hollywood could not control themselves when it came to women. Why, Roger Moore couldn't control his wandering pee-pee. Watch this video and find out.